Good morning. This is a thick week of reading, and I'm going to try to introduce a few guidelines that may help you arrange the material thematically. Let us begin by recalling that in 1495 there was the papal recognition of the Confraternity for the Veneration of Mary. This was the official recognition of the practice of the Rosary, which was a reflective practice, and you may recall the image of the penitent Magdalene by de la Tour as reflective of looking inward. And at this time, the belief was that what one saw when one looked in was the light of Christ. So the candle becomes an iconographic expression of the light of Christ. So the reforming tradition, which has this whole reflective emphasis, can be expressed in a number of different ways. One is reforms in the councils, and that's really what Trent is about, to try to reform practices so that there's an alignment, but an alignment that holds reflective spirituality at the center. One can go in another direction, and that would be the direction that Ignatius and Teresa take, which is a more concentrated emphasis upon inner spiritual reflection. For both Ignatius and Teresa, that the power of spiritual growth comes from the concentrated practice of disciplined exercise, so that the outcome is a recognition of things that were not at first obvious. This happens for Teresa in the interior castle. It happens for Ignatius when he says, well, if the church says it's white and I don't see it as that, I'll go along with that. But that's not because it's blind faith. It's because through spiritual exercise, Ignatius becomes acutely aware of the limits of his own perception and the possibility that what is being transmitted by the church is a greater truth. Now, that's to emphasize the power of the Spirit, and it's a one easy step to say Luther emphasizes the power of the Spirit in the gift of the Word, so that Luther has an immediate sense of the truth of the Word. But those in Trent are going to say, no, following Erasmus and Augustine, language is communal and it is inherited, so language always means with a history. So we have two competing notions, one of the immediacy of truth and one of truth being mediated over time through communities and tradition and ritual practices. If you take the Luther position and say, well, no, it's really that grace trumps the law, the power of the moment, you can move very quickly into the various religious experiments which were antinomian, that is, against the law, which become eventually the Anabaptists, who hold up Scripture as the sole word, the power of the word, as you get in Zwingli. Literalism is a word that we can stumble over here. What's really being talked about is the power of the word. And so if it's the power of the word does not need to be enhanced by other things, it is simply the power of the word. So Zwingli says, let nothing be done which is not explicitly enjoined by Scripture. And he's talking about the power of the word. And the power of the word that comes to us in reflection, so that the memorial of the Eucharist is a bringing back into our eyes the very act of what is essential to our creation, namely the capacity to remember, to recall, to reflect. That is what it is to be a created being. So we are recreated in the moment of that reflection, recreated in the moment of the Eucharist, and is that recreation within us that is so central. Now you can take that one step further and go with Sattler and say, look, it's the power of the word, and the only thing that matters is the word, and everything else that you talk about is extraneous. So if we look at these things, we begin to see that there's a tension between whether there is an immediacy in the word, no matter how you're going to interpret that, more spiritually or more the form of the word per se, or the mediacy of the word, that is, its relationship to tradition. And those are broad strokes within which we can understand the readings that we are taking on for this morning. I hope you have a good time with them.